just sort of driving up to a station somewhere and saying, hey, can we show up with 400 students and run around the place for 24 hours?
It certainly does make it look like some sort of mad race for sustenance or life. And then seeing these people for some reason just continue to run around and around the hills.
A fully organised 24-hour cross-country walk, believed to be the first of its kind attempted in New Zealand, will be held by the University of Canterbury Tramping Club on June the 24th and 25th in 1967.
It's an unusual event. The things I liked about it was that you got to walk all night if you wished.
These little moments of intensity, which I think is part of the beauty of an event that makes you stay up all night. You do have these moments of maybe snapping.
Twalk is never meant to be predictable. It's never meant to be something that you can train really hard at and then win because you trained really hard. It's sort of always meant to have an element of luck.
That hunger, the cold, the exhaustion.
Something surreal about going through areas which you would not normally go.
I mean, the popularity isn't hard to understand because, it's a lot of fun.
It's nothing better than to be out on a full moon in the middle of the night, miles from anywhere.
You're outdoors, it's a mental challenge as well as a physical challenge. You've got a plan, a strategy in it.
I've been out there on one leg for at least 12 hours in the snow, in a storm. We were comfortable. I got hooked the very first time. This weird and wonderful idea came up when I was a student.
Twalk. It's that great New Zealand crazy adventure. We even had Aussies coming over here to compete in it. A bit hard to tell them what to expect, but they'll find out.
Twalk is a 24-hour event where you go around in teams and do legs. So the idea is that you don't know where the location is.
My first one was in 1969.
If I remember.
We had a very social team. There were no costumes, and I carried a pack, and it was a mountain mule full of, we'll say, liquid sustenance. And every checkpoint we found, we celebrated that. People said they could hear us coming from miles away. But we had a great little team. I think there was 4 of us. In those days, when I went through as a student, there was only 2 women in the engineering school, and one of them was in our team. We slept out the night in the pine forests of the Balmoral forests, just because we could.
The Twalk at Mount Lyford was probably about my second or third Twalk, and this bloke comes running past with a netball skirt on, and someone said, "Oh, that's Chris Vaughan." So that was how I first got introduced to the person who is now actually my husband.
On the morning you turn up in your fancy dress and we'll get bussed off to some exciting location.
The whole excitement builds up at the car park because everybody's arriving. We're all in costume.
You'll, I guess, find out when you hop off the bus where you are, hopefully. We'll at least be given a map anyway.
People are starting to guess where we're going to go this year. Some of us have done talks all over Canterbury, and you sort of can almost plot them in your head of this place, that place, where would you like to go?
then you have to find your way to the hash house, which has always received some amusement of its naming being a hash house, but that's where the food is. So you find your way there via some circuitous route, finding some checkpoints, and then more or less for the next 24 hours keep going out on loops, trying to get as many checkpoints as you can.
It was very competitive in those days. Yeah, people were running.
There's a lot of people that are keen for a teams rather than an individual kind of event, and the fact that it's not super serious, like it's sort of a little bit competitive, but you can do it just for fun.
It's grown in size and it's become popular, I think, because of the variety of things it caters for. It's not just an endurance event. There is that aspect to it. You've actually got the people that win it are the top orienteers or row gainers in the world. They've just won the World Row Gaining Champs. So at the top end, you've got really high quality navigators. So it's an endurance event and it's a high quality navigation event. But then you've got the other aspects of it. It's all right navigating, but once you're there, you've got to solve a cryptic crossword type clue. You've got to find something that's hidden.
The unique thing to Twalk is that you can do it with a very big range of abilities in the team, because some people can only just do, a couple of legs or do the first leg and then have a sleep until, go out on leg 4.
Once the day arrives, it's nerve-wracking because you're up at 5 in the morning to get yourself and everything sorted and see everyone off onto the buses. Hopefully you don't leave anyone in the car park at the university. But I don't think I ever really relax until after the go, because one year we definitely did lose a bus, at least for a while, maybe half an hour. But we found them again.
I think one of the fundamentals of Twalk is that prior to the event, you don't know where you're going to be. Often the bus drivers would take off in completely the opposite direction, go round in circles and loops in the city and out on this way, and then cut across, and then finally sort of zero in on a direction where we're heading. And people, of course, would be that there's a lot of chatter about where we're actually likely to end up. It doesn't really matter.
Anticipation on the bus. It's a pain getting to Studhouse and it's a pain standing around and waiting for the bus. But once you're on the bus, everyone's sort of gossiping away, looking at each other's costumes. And where are we going? Because you get off in the middle of nowhere and you don't have a map. You don't know where you are when you get a map. You've got to sort of look at the map and say, well, we must be here. There's a bridge over there. There's a hill up there. So that's part of it.
Phoenix 3, HB goat suckers.
To get dropped off at a location and you still don't know where you're going to go, and you're given a map and a set of clues and a few instructions, and away you go.
I treat Twalk pretty seriously, especially when it comes to the costume.
They were a relatively recent idea.
There were never any costumes. It was all very serious,
In the early days, we never had costumes. Our gear was our costume, basically.
And in those days, that was black rugby shorts. And the girls wore the black rugby shorts too. And the old woolen long johns.
And that's what we used to use for gaiters. For each leg you have a strip of basically a woolen blanket, bit over 1 metre long, and you wrap it round your calf, then round over the top of your boots, and then back up around your calf again and tie it up with the tape at the top here. It's just a single bit of tape. And that acts as a gaiter. It keeps the snow out of your shoes, keeps seeds out of your shoes, boots, and gives you a lot of ankle support, and also gives you a warm leg too. Most of the time I've done Twalks, we've been reasonably serious about it. Especially in the first sort of 20 or so years. if there was a costume that was an optional thing and we didn't really dress up much. But some of the people did. Chris Fawn going along as a couch potato one time. They all dressed up with large paper mache type potatoes around them like that. And they carried a couch, an entire couch for the entire first section, going through gorse, through creeks, through forest and everything.
The costumes are a fun part of it.
Yeah, you really need to have a prop so you could, take something along with you. And
Yeah, got a little bit tricky.
definitely, obviously, there's lots of teams that also have taken some unusual contraptions.
7 years of experience in costume making.
Yeah, I think it sort of adds to the excitement. I mean, normally it is only for the first leg, but it's part of the fun. Sometimes it's good to be deliberately impractical because then it's clearly more of a statement that you've put more effort into the costume. Because, if it's too easy, then, well, clearly you haven't done a good enough job with the costume if you can, run. When we had the gypsy wagon, it unfortunately was rather windy and the cart was more or less trying to blow away. We had to do some reinforcements sort of out there on the course where we kind of did some extra sort of bracing with some bits of string and different things, but it's sort of partly involved with us having to hold it to keep it upright. So yeah, well, it wasn't quite the best conditions for a wagon that year.
We're gonna have a supper in order to have a good time. What the clues look like. The controls are on these.
The clues originally was a plastic box or tin about that size. I used to get them from chemists, like pill boxes and stuff like that with a plastic lid. And we used to get these raffle butts you can get. You can still get them today, like newsprint with a tear-off bit with a 7 of hearts on it and a 7 of hearts with a butt. So you have 2 matching halves of a ticket. So you put a book in each checkpoint site, and the pattern on that is pretty much unique, so no 2 books would really be alike. And so you had to go and tear off a ticket to show that you visited that checkpoint and present that when you got back.
But I don't think we concentrated. There was no real feedback on other people other than your own estimates of where you were. But nowadays you know where you are relative to everybody else, except if they are out on a course, you don't know how many they've got until they come back. In the early days, no, that was part of the mystery. You didn't know where you really were. Sometimes, just depending on the conditions, if a team doesn't find a few and you do, it can completely change it. You might actually be lagging a team and yet you might be ahead on points.
These white plastic containers used to be reasonably obvious, like in the notch of a tree or on the ground somewhere. But they weren't cryptic in those days. It crept in gradually, because we used to have symbols or signs like bottom of signpost. That was quite common because that was where you could put one of these things, or even when you changed to a piece of paper with a name on it, it was easier and safer to fasten at the bottom of a signpost than halfway up because it would survive better. Cattle wouldn't eat it, people wouldn't take it away because it was a bit hidden. So they were a bit hidden just for security. We had another one was the cryptic clue. It's called Australia, so that's not too cryptic. And this is before they were all that. They weren't too well hidden in those days. So anyway, there's a group of gum trees there, and so we walked up this group of gum trees. Australian trees. That's what Australian means. And I found a tree with the letter A on it. I said, that's a small word, but that'll be it. So we wrote down A and pissed off. But apparently there was a group of trees and there was a separate letter on each tree and you had to get all of the letters and make a word out of them. So we didn't get that one, even though we'd found the checkpoint. So, yeah, there's been a long history of being cryptic. I might have been the guilty person. One time I was putting one on the bottom of a fence post in the middle of nowhere, part of an old fence line. I noticed it was very loose on the ground. So under the fence post, I pulled up and put the checkpoint on the ground and put it back down again. And I think after that, everyone thought this is really fun. And it went crazy. So the next year onwards, we had all these hidden cryptic clues.
I think there's that sort of behind all the fun, there is the strategy of particularly the top teams. how do you actually get ahead?
You don't want to give away where the checkpoint is if you found it.
If you've got another team around you, you want to try and get the control without them finding it. And you would, we would often turn our torches off, hide, wait, whatever, if we thought a team was having trouble finding it.
I remember one particular cryptic clue was something like block, block, dole, dole, train, train. That was the clue. And you know what it's like. You get to the area on the map where you've got the circle, which is about 100 square metres, and start trying to work out what the clue might mean there. In this case, you got there, and it was pretty obvious it was a toy bush. Toy. Blocks, trains, dolls, they're all toys. So it was the middle of a toy bush. But having worked out that it was the toy bush, it still took a quarter of an hour to find because it was buried right down in the middle of it. A small piece of paper. Concentrate on reading the map. You concentrate on the first checkpoint very hard because that's the one you're most likely to cock up.
But you'll give off a presence of having found it, even though you're trying not to. So you have false signals, so you have a signal that you hope that people will interpret as being a signal that you found it, even though you haven't found it. The classic one that, obviously lots of people was like, I think we should give up now. And even just how long to hunt for the checkpoint's kind of an important thing, because, if you spend too long hunting, the more time you spend but don't find it, then obviously it's just time wasted. And so that's quite the art in Twalk, is to know when is a good time to give up. And I guess that also gets influenced by whether you think the other team's found it. Because if you think the team's found it, then you think, well, it's obviously there, someone's found it, so we probably should keep hunting, they clearly found it. Whereas so often, if you can make it, the other team think you found it, even if you haven't, and you head off, then they'll waste more time and you'll be able to get a gap. So I know there's quite a bit of strategy that goes on.
We came to an electric fence, and they were both wearing gumboots, and so they didn't get a shock. And I said to them, "Are you sure that this fence isn't turned on?" And they said, "Oh, no, it's not. See, we've been able to get over the gumboots, no problem." And I was wearing hiking boots, and I got a heck of a shock. And so that's one of the main things I remember of that tramp. But again, I could see the funny side of it.
It started in electrical engineering. I think the idea was in Australia, and he suggested it start here.
There's several stories about where that started. Some say it's from the Melbourne University Tramping Club. Others say it came from an inter-varsity or an inter-school challenge they had. Certainly it came from three people, Neil Phillips and Rod Phillips and Gail Phillips, the three of them as brothers and sisters. And they created it from the Twalk concept.
By the time I came along, it was in its third year.
The very first Twalk, Greg brought the ideas from Australia, and in Australia you have vast tracts of countryside with no owner, if you like, public forest. You don't have to ask permission. In Australia, they didn't even tell the landowners where they were going. So Greg came out here and he organised the first Twalk and didn't ask the landowners. So we were tramping basically illegally on private property without permission. And we started up the Thomas River or something. We drove all our cars to there or something and parked them there and went off into the wilderness, and the bus took our packs of stuff around. And the farmers saw all these people tramping all over their land and saw all the cars parked there and started doing things to the cars, like taking tyres off or immobilising them. And they got in trouble with the police for that. We didn't get in trouble with the police for trespassing because, you know, you had to be warned. There's all kinds of laws about that. So anyway, that was not a good start with landowner relationships. So after that, we made a point of making sure you got landowner permission. Ask first.
Once upon a time, the event was an honesty type event, is that you kept going until the cut-off time, 24 hours, and it didn't matter where you were, and then you had to come back. So it was an honesty thing that you stopped and then turned around and came back to the hash house.
Yeah, why has Twalk lasted as long as it has? It's a good question.
The beauty of it is that it has kept its sort of tradition for so long, whereas, you know, most events have come and gone and faded, whereas Twalk's definitely, you know, one of the longest running events, you know, in New Zealand probably. I think it has kept more or less the same kind of feel and sort of appeal as what it probably had originally.
One year, it was being set by a team of electrical engineering students, and the week before Twalk, when they were putting out the checkpoints, they got lost up in the Waipara Valley, Waipara River. And so it was news in Monday's paper, you know, Twalk setters found when Waipara River rescued by helicopter or something like that. So, we know where we're going this year. But in fact, it doesn't matter. If you know where you're going, it still doesn't help. You know, you don't know where the checkpoints are, you don't know where you're starting from, you don't know where the clues are. But so it's a good tradition. It's all part of the fun.
We have a very hard time finding suitable farms, and a big reason is in the 70s deer farming was illegal in New Zealand. You couldn't farm deer, so there wasn't this intensive farming on the lowland paddocks on high country stations. And now, like, pretty much every high country station in Canterbury has some sort of intensive, well-fenced deer.
I think the biggest issue is going to be land access rather than students. A change of land use. You know, sheep farms become dairy farms, so there's intensive fencing, and who knows when the next trend is going to come in where you want more deer fencing.
If you're trying to organise how to get people up in the backcountry through those areas, you've got farmers who say, sure, you can go on my farm, just don't go anywhere near the deer paddocks. But, you know, if all of the area around near the sheep sheds is deer paddock, it's quite hard.
It's always a great sensation to get to the hash house at the end of section 1. Because now you know you can have a rest, you know, and it's still daylight, you hope, and you want to get out in section 2 before it gets dark.
The hash house, to me, is one of the defining features of Twalk. I enjoy Twalk because you have this time where you need to spend at the hash house.
Well, the very first one, the hash house, was an Australian one, which means there wasn't one. You had to bring your own tent. Since then they've improved remarkably. I mean, we usually try and get a wool shed. It's the most common thing. Sometimes we get a school hall, that's pretty luxurious, but usually it's a farm wool shed, and you sort of can smell the sheep in the pens out the back.
Initially, it wasn't compulsory to stay half an hour. You could just come in and go out if you wish. And when we were more competitive, the top teams would literally do that. You'd walk in the door, get checked, sketch up your mat and gone as fast as possible. But I actually like the idea of having a compulsory hash house. The best part of that, of course, is the food. Is just the quality of food is just tremendous. You always put together a great set of cooks, and you've got a lot of gear. So that's something to look forward to.
It was in the wool shed, and they would have had, big pots for stew and soup, and not lots of fancy food, just basic. But people were really happy with the quantity of food, heaps of food.
I think it's a good feature of Twalk, and it helps the socialisation of teams as well. It becomes a focal point of the whole thing. Doesn't matter what you do.
And hopefully section 2 is not too long, so you come back into the hash house in time for a really good feed. That's the time when we'll probably have our big feeders at the end of section 2. Buzz off, this is not Australia.
The food is amazing. It's varied. There's lots of it.
The stereotypical Twalk dish would be lasagna, I think.
We refused to professionally cater this event just because that wouldn't be fun. And as such, you need to rely on some really, good-hearted people to stay up for something like 36 hours, just constantly cooking food and cleaning up and catering for 300, 400 people who were all out running around. So it's not just your average catering, it's a lot of food.
3 a.m. arrival at the hash house, apple crumble is what I'm keen to see. It's normally sort of dessert time about then.
And somehow doing that with no, hot running water or places to wash dishes or anything in a wool shed.
What it'll taste like, I won't make any promises. I had never done Twalk when I first signed up for the cooking back in 2011. So I didn't really know what I was getting myself into in that regard. Roasted. 24 people probably total assisted in the kitchen at some point in time. And we probably had more of like a group of 12, maybe half of that, who was involved in the kitchen quite a lot. There was nobody there who had like the deer in the headlights look, which I remember from some past kitchens. So but this is like somebody who's never cooked before, who somehow wandered into the Twalk kitchen. It's like, oh my God, what have I gotten myself into? I don't even think there were that many injuries. I burnt myself twice in the first 20 or 30 minutes of trying to get the ovens working. But then I never lopped off a finger or anything after that. I tried to sell it as a party. There was promises of beer, debauchery, dancing, and a general lively attitude. I mean, this year in particular, I actually just set out a menu plan. I considered lunch. We'll be having sandwiches, muffins, soup, and fruit. And then we'll move on to dinner. Dinner will be lasagna, sheep, cabbage, and apple crisp. And we never like stopped making lunch and started making dinner. They just sort of blended into each other. But when we were running out of lunch stuff, we started to like put out and have prepared dinner stuff. And then dinner turned into just like night snacks of roasted potatoes and cakes. And then breakfast was kind of streamlined because everyone's exhausted then. And we don't really care anymore. It's hard to keep the the energy and enthusiasm going. It was still good. It's like cereals, porridge, toast, perhaps. But my favorite sort of cooking experiences are the ones where it doesn't feel like work. You're prepared. It's the fun of deconstructing food and then reconstructing it in tasty ways. And when you have enough food and you have enough help and you have enough time, maybe you have enough wine, it's a really delightful experience. And so I tried to emphasize that element to other people. The right company. You've gone to the trouble of buying this food, and you've gone to the trouble of getting all these ovens and equipment into this hash house. And so you can deliver that like with minimal cooking, but with extra hours. I think you can really up the level. Actually, the landowner that we were running the event on had the animals. Presumably, he probably has several thousand sheep, but he managed to give us 2 of them. They were all slaughtered by the time we arrived. And it was great that it was coming from that farm. In some ways, it seems like a nice way for the farmer to be involved. I mean, if he was growing potatoes, I'd buy those. If he was, it's a cool part of it. If we were doing it on a farm that grew something else, it'd be cool if we could, buy some of their stuff and use that. Sort of a unique flavor to each different location. If we were perhaps talking on a winery, maybe none of us would leave the hash house. The coziness of the Friday night rain is really beautiful in the woolshed, I reckon. And I find there's a sweetness to that smell even. The kind of woolly, sheep shitty kind of smell.
Had some enjoyable memories of cooking between about midnight and 6 in the morning because everyone else in the cooking crew had fallen asleep.
Yeah, I don't feel like there's the best form of preservation and passing of knowledge, but it's also not the worst. Like, information is passed year to year. Some things are lost because a lot of it is personal taste. A lot of it's how do you cook? How do you like to cook? Do you like everything to be precise? Do you like a little bit of wiggle room flying by the seat of your pants?
There must have been some form of manual scoring system, but it was exactly that.
We just had a giant big chipboard, just a blackboard that we chalked up and just had, I guess before the teams, when we arrived at the hash house, just sort of wrote all the team names down beside and had 5 columns of leg 1, 2, and just filled in as the night went on.
Yeah, see, I can remember when they started that. Well, actually, I think Rowan Sinton, he started it when we were off, and we just heard from our friends, like, oh wow, Twalk's just gone up, a whole level in terms of technology. And we came back and we did our first talk, I can't remember, it must have been about 2012, since we'd been away, because we were away for a few years. And we came back and, that we were very excited to find out this new system.
Team, wiggle wobble, get it on a plate. Just alive.
Yeah, there's a particular, that voice has got a bit of a tone to it. It's quite distinctive now. I think when you hear it, you definitely...
Asterisk, something topical, asterisk. You can now sign out for the next leg.
Yeah, right.
Psychologically, I think the hardest period is actually going into the dark because it's more difficult to see maps. You've got to start using torches to see, and it's closing in, the night is closing in on you. And if you've not experienced that before, there's always a little bit of apprehension.
It's quite a novel experience that I think is pretty exciting. I guess it can be quite sort of a little bit desolate if there's not too many teams around because you can't see so far, because it's not all lit up in the day, you tend to be more just sort of closed in on your little sort of world that's quite sort of small, and you don't see the other teams even if they're reasonably close. Obviously if it's good weather then you can see a lot of lights shining off in the distance, which sometimes means it's easier to spot where your opposition or the other teams are.
A good talk, to me, you can't always judge it, but if you can be out from about 3 o'clock onwards, you'll get through the night. But if you come back in that sort of time, it's really hard to go back out again because naturally you just want to go to sleep. I've literally laid down in snow and gone to sleep you do a power nap because you need to. But that's it. You can power nap and get up and carry on. If you do that back at the hash house, then you'll probably say, oh, we'll wait till dawn.
Yeah. The 3 a.m. blues, 4 a.m. blues, staying awake in the middle of the night.
It used to be held on the shortest day or close to shortest day. So often it'd be a really cold, hard, frosty night. And it's just amazing. Once it's actually dark is actually a good time because now you just start focusing on just moving through the night. You have to knock back your pace. You realise that you can actually move around the countryside at night quite well with a map and a torch and a compass. One of my goals was always to try and move around the countryside without a torch. And even to this day, I don't like big torches because they kill your night eyes. And in fact, we developed, one of my student projects at one stage was a xenon strobe light. One of my students developed, and I took that on one of the talks. And this was a precursor to LEDs. Of course, we had incandescent bulbs and they would fail and they would burn out or your batteries would go flat, and so you'd have multiple battery packs and all sorts of things.
In the end, I made an LED torch. It's way before you could buy LED torches. It's about 2002 or something like that, running off a single AA battery. And we still use those. We've actually won a couple of world championships using just those torches. So the light isn't very bright, but you keep your night vision. You can look at the map, you can look up and you can see the horizon, you can see patterns through trees. But these days, everyone's got these powerful headlights, So our little wee old torch is sort of no longer useful because everyone else blinds you with their big torches. He invented this torch, which is just a straight-out 12-volt car bulb with a 12-volt car battery in his pack. It was the early days of the really bright lights, and we're in the Mount Thomas forest. And sometime in the middle of the night, he could smell smoke. And the chap behind him and his team said, "Hey, Pete, your pack's on fire." So I looked, and sure enough, he'd had a bad wiring terminal or something, and a bit of a short circuit and enough energy in the battery to start a fire. And so, fortunately, there was a stream right handy in the bush. So a whole lot went into this. It was quite a big fire by the time Pete noticed it. So his pack and his light and battery and everything, all his clothes, and himself too, I think, went into the stream. So he was living in the dark for the rest of the night.
I guess the night is definitely one of the things I quite look forward to. I think mostly because the navigation is trickier at night, and I guess I always enjoy a bit of navigational challenge.
It's underneath the rocky outcrop, and there's just rocky outcrops everywhere.
To me, night navigation is what really makes this whole event.
Maybe there's a footbridge. Yeah, my feeling is it should be around. What's that? Oh, got it. So...
between here and the fin.
Yeah. Yep.
Here and the fin.
Yeah.
Oh, thanks for the hint. James. He's doing great.
Oh, you found Steve, eh?
All right.
Oh, good. Awesome.
Halfway through the night, all the contours on the map suddenly inverted themselves on me, and I I don't know, because you know how the topo maps are, they're shaded, and if you kind of have it back to front and you're a bit tired and you're not really thinking about it, somehow the shading sort of goes the wrong way, and all the shading in my brain had gone the wrong direction, so all of a sudden all the gullies were spurs, and I just couldn't make sense of it. I was like, I know we were about here on the map and we should be going here, but this is like this hill and it should be going down, and it took me like about 20 minutes, and eventually you sort of like all flip back into the right way around, and it's like, oh, now I understand what's going on.
Sunrise is amazing because of the warmth the sun brings, especially if it's been a cold, hard frost. Despite how much you're eating and that, by the early hours of the morning your body wants to wind down, you're cold. I've been shivering away there, still trying to eat but still can't get warm, and you get the first rays of sunlight. One of the challenges, I think, over the 24 hours is that you are moving from a stage where you are both physically and mentally very aware and you lock into what you're doing. But of course, over time, your body starts getting quite tired. And so the challenge over the night, and that's because normally because we sleep at night, that's you want to be physically inert. That's what you've been practicing through the rest of your life. And yet here you're asking your body to keep going. So the difficulty there, becomes very mentally. You just got to concentrate on what you're doing, and it takes a wee bit of while to learn that you can keep going even though you feel exhausted. You can easily keep going, which is it's a limit to find, and something that's very good that comes out of it. You naturally wake up, so later on, so in the early hours of the morning, next morning, you're usually mentally wide awake. And I've tried different strategies. Do you just slow down and go through the night and then finish out? Or do you take a break and then come out with a rush in the end? And after all these years, I still don't know which is the best.
There was this guy, Pete Squires, who always beat them every year. And every year they got quite close to beating him, but never could actually manage it. So then I'd fed Pete Squires laxatives on the bus on the journey up there. He said, these aren't anything suspicious, are they, Jenny? I said, no, they're really delicious sweets, Have a handful. So he took a real handful. We cheated and skipped a couple of checkpoints as we were going round in circles, and we got to this checkpoint and put that we'd been there, and it was way ahead of Pete Squires, and so Pete Squires got there and really hacked off. We were hiding nearby, how dare she get here before us, and so that was obviously really demoralising for him, and we discovered then, but yeah, the laxatives had started working. In the end though, Pete Squires' team still won, but only just by a few seconds. So it made it one of the most exciting competitions at that time with Twalk. It was very, very close.
We had quite an excitement when I was organising at Mount Lyford, where it was quite warm to begin with, and then it started raining, and then it started snowing.
When he was the organiser, I was one of the teams in the blizzard.
Most people were out on the second leg, I think, at the time, but it was just as it was getting dark, and they hadn't really mostly taken that appropriate clothing because it had sort of been quite warm when they left. And then we had all these rumours of all these people getting lost because it was all gone sort of dark and misty.
I was in one of the teams that was up on this ridge line, and it started off, it was pouring with rain, and then the rain kind of changed and turned into snow, and so we were soaking wet, and then it was freezing cold, and we started to walk through. The snow started to build up pretty quickly. And we came across this checkpoint that we thought was the checkpoint that was on our course, but it was in a slightly weird place, and I was sort of struggling to work out where we were. But then more and more teams sort of started to gather together, and the winds got stronger and the snow got stronger, and we couldn't really see where we were all going. And we all ended up deciding that, okay, we've actually got no idea where we are, and this is probably quite a dodgy situation to be in. So at that point, we all decided to make a retreat. So we all just kind of headed off down this ridgeline into a valley below. Nobody actually had much clue at all where we were, but we all just sort of bumbled along together. And by that stage, there must have been about 30 people all together in this kind of crazy storm trying to work out. But we got down eventually and finally sort of came across this road, and then the teams kind of dispersed and we all sort of traipsed back to the hash house. And then I remember seeing Chris, he came in and he said, I'm heading out to try and rescue some people. Does anyone want to come with me? And I remember almost thinking at the time that I was quite tempted to put my hand up and say I'd join him, but then I thought, I don't know about that guy, so maybe I won't.
As an organiser, that wasn't quite such a good position to be in. We ended up making a little bit of a rescue party and trying to go out and find some people, but everyone had more or less, clumped together and managed to pretty much get themselves back, so it ended up being no problem.
You end up being in some situations because of the event that you would not normally put yourself in. I've been on 1 or 2 Twalks which have been in snowstorms, can't see a thing, and as long as you dress up for it, you got food, and you just carry on. And for some strange reason, all of that is overridden by the fact you're looking for a control. That's weird. You don't normally do that sort of thing. So, yeah, I think it's the enjoyment of finding out that what you thought were limits actually disappear. They're often self-imposed. In the middle of the night, and apparently where we were was 15 degrees of frost, and we came across a sheep stranded in a creek, and 2 of us just plunged straight in, got soaked up to our waists and pulled the sheep out and held it and got it until it was cast in there, and we got it and got it moving again. And here we are in this frost and we're totally saturated, and you just take off and carry on walking as if nothing happened. You don't normally put yourself in a situation like that.
We did have some very cold ones. One checkpoint, or one talk we had, again up in the Springfield area, very cold, very frosty night. We were the front team. We came up to a small pond about the size of this room, and the checkpoint was a word again, but it was tied to a small gorse bush. And there'd been a lot of rain, and when they tied it there, it was above the water level. Now it was below the water level, but we could see it, so we got the checkpoint. Anyway, by the time the next team came along, the pond had frozen over. They couldn't see it. No one else got that checkpoint. Just frozen solid with the night, so it was flipping cold.
The key with Twalk is that you've got to find these little hidden checkpoints without letting the rest of the teams know. And so one of the keys, you've got to keep a real close eye on everyone out there to try and ascertain who might have found it, because if you've got 10 people hunting, then someone's going to find it, and if you can determine who it was that found it, then you know that they were over there, then you go over there, and of course hopefully you see it, and sometimes it's quite tricky to not give it away. I remember we spent ages before Twalk coming up with our exciting clues that we'd be able to let the rest of our team know that we found the checkpoint without letting the other teams know. We decided our thing would be like, have you got the first aid kit? Or something, we'd be like, I need the first aid kit or something. And so we got to the checkpoint and one of our team found it, and they were yelled out, I need the first aid kit. And the rest of the team had already forgotten that this was our code word. And they were like, what's happened? And they were sort of coming to get there. Thought they got and stabbed themselves or something.
See, I reckon our best costume actually was the one that we were the Pied Pipers, and we had the recorders. And the recorders were our technique of showing that we'd actually found the checkpoint. And it worked pretty well, and there was definitely, I remember, in the middle of the night, this was a good way of demoralising the opponent, because the other team was right with us and they were really, we were head to head. And we were in this massive pile of gorse bushes and we were all spread out. There was 11 of us on the Pied Piper team, all with recorders. And we were all hunting, and the other team was hunting, and we were hunting and hunting. We must have been hunting for about 20 minutes.
And it was dark,
and it
which
was
is
pitch
good.
dark and full of like gorse everywhere. And then suddenly, I just heard this little distant beep of the recorder, and our whole team was just like converged out of the bushes. And the other team at that point, pretty much that was it. They went and sat down on a rock and moped because they realised they were never going to find the checkpoint. And yeah, that was the end of that. That was it for them. So.
And I remember about 10 or 11 o'clock at night, or no, probably 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, had about a 2 kilometre road walk. I was like, this is a good chance to sort of nod off of it. So I was walking along, eyes were closing, I was listening to Bill next to me, and I was just going along with Bill. I'd wake up and we'd still be on track, and I'd nod off and listen to Bill and wake up again. And about 3 or 4 years later, I told Bill about that. He said, funny, I was doing exactly the same thing listening to you. No wonder we both didn't wander off the track.
It's a huge amount of work that goes into it.
I mean, finding the location is always the hardest bit.
Hey, can we bring a few hundred people? Never specify how many.
Some farmers are absolutely anti and won't hear a bar of it. Others are ambivalent, and some of them, one or two, said no initially, and then later on they talked to the neighbour and said, yeah, that'll be fine. So word gets around. But it's important to keep up landowner relationships because, our future depends on it, and you've got to make sure that they're happy with the concept.
Access onto properties is always a big issue for any outdoor activity. But my experience is that farmers in general, once they understand what's going on, get them behind it. We've had farmers who have come out looking for us or seen us going way from where they know the hash house is supposed to be.
Most farmers love their farms, they love the country, and they like seeing other people enjoying it. And once they see that we enjoy it and, we're not buggering it up too much, then they're pretty enthusiastic.
They enjoyed it. They enjoyed having it there. They were really delighted, to have it on their property. And they really liked the idea of all the young people charging around, finding checkpoints on their place, and having their wool shed being used as the hash house.
Probably only about 50 or 60 people turned up for some of those early events, whereas now you've got hundreds.
50 years, strong as it ever was.
Yeah, the numbers are a bit of an issue. So my first talk in 2011, I think we were definitely in the 100s. And then when I did talk in 2012, and it was sort of a little bit easier than people thought, I think then maybe that did bring in a few more of those beginnery types because they weren't so scared off. We do everything we can to make sure that everyone who wants to take part can. The only limitation really is the food.
Not just the logistics of catering, but just for sheer pressure on landowners. Having 500 people running all over your land at all hours of the night and in any direction is a bit of a big ask. Depends on the terrain. In the back country it's probably not such a big issue, but the catering and the hash house I think is a limiting factor really.
Me and Mike Great organised the talk up at Mount Lyford, and we got the Mount Lyford Lodge. We had access to the hot pools as part of our, booking of the lodge. And it was, a little bit more expensive than normal, and as you say, it was a bit further away. I think it was generally made even more pity by the fact that it got snowy and lots of teams already stopped and then went in the hot pools. But the overall state of the lodge after people had sort of not done the best job perhaps of taking off shoes or things was not quite so good, so we ended up having to pay a bit extra for some special dry cleaning, but I think after that they all seemed happy. So,
as the organiser, you're planning what people are going to be doing with themselves throughout the night, where they'll be going, which steep bits or shallow bits or swampy bits you're going to force them to go through.
I've only organised once, and it was the one that we did at Lake Ida, and I guess then I was fairly involved with the course setting element of it and also the kind of overall organisation. We did lots of trips up into the nearby hills and sussed it all out.
The technology certainly changed. Some of the first couple of talks I did, you always got given grid references and you had to
plot it
on.
Yeah.
So part of the skill was you had to, if you're really cunning, people will print out these little little overhead on transparency paper, a little, grid, so they could overlay it onto their map to help get the dots in the right, places quickly. And it used to definitely be just on a topo map, whereas more recently there's been, I guess, a variety of elaborations on the topo map. And we changed all the symbols. So the normal topo map symbol, instead of having your green forest, we had this green forest that was filled with spiders. Yeah. And then we had like the lake.
The lake had little whales.
Whales in it.
And the hash house was actually like a little picture.
And we had a little bus that was put on the map, and I sort of increased the relief shading about double or triple. Pretty much my pride of mapping. If I had to think of all the maps I've done, I think that Twalk was probably the cream of the most beautiful map. We had a checkpoint in the middle of the lake.
Yeah, we just
there was sort of optional to swim out there, or you could take these kayaks.
There was 2 kayaks that we had stationed there, but I guess it was to add an element of, it was right by the hash house, so we thought, this will be quite entertaining to watch people.
Because it wasn't obviously obvious where the checkpoint was.
No.
I mean, there's kind of not until they actually got there that they probably realised that the checkpoint was actually out in the lake. Because the clue was, on the circle of the map, you can't really, it was just a smaller thing. But then there was something like, I don't know, a clue was something like rubber ducky or whatever.
It was on a rubber ducky. It was attached to a rubber ducky. And it was highly entertaining to watch. We saw there was a couple of the quite sort of competitive teams came running in, and one of them took the kayak option, and the other one, I think it was Matt Scott, decided that it was going to be faster. Was it Aaron? I can't remember. One of them anyway. Decided it was going to be faster to run, like swim, run. I don't think they realised how deep it was or how cold it was, because it was both of those things. And they went charging out.
They got way out.
Yeah, but then they slowed down. Right down. The kayaker starts coming out and catching up, and it was. I think they had a bit of an audience by that stage. So all the people from the hash house, all the cooks came out to watch.
The crossing of Lake Pearson was definitely a highlight. That was pretty much a saviour of that league. It made it fantastically good, because of course you didn't want to get freezing wet, so it was just a good excuse to take all your clothes off.
I just remember arriving down at the beach.
And there's just people, there's about 300 people, and it's just like all this big beach.
They're all naked.
And some people were just obviously a bit more prudish. But
not many. There was stripping off.
There was a lot of general eagerness to kind of just, and I guess because everyone else is, then you sort of just get into the spirit of. Yeah, it's a tricky balance, because it's easy when you're setting them to either make it too difficult, which I sometimes have done too, where you kind of think you found something obvious,
but it's not. And
then you realise, especially in the night time, that this thing that's somehow looked a distinctive bush no longer looks very distinctive. Because I went out on one of the legs I'd even set just for fun with some teams in the night, and I was like, I don't even really know where I put it anymore. I'm sure there was that obvious bush around here somewhere.
We'd done 4 legs and we'd just finishing the 5th leg, and he was pissed off because they had to go out and set a 6th leg for us, even though about only 3 or 4 hours left to go. So anyway, we left the hash house. The first checkpoint was here. The second one was about 3 kilometres to a large superphosphate bin with a whole lot of tyres around it. And something about feeling tired, So he had to go and look through all these tyres to find out where the clue was. And the next checkpoint was another 3 or 4 kilometres way across there, and it was about an hour's walk away. And he said the clue for the 5th checkpoint is written in the 4th checkpoint. So we got over to the hut, found the clue there, and the clue for the 5th checkpoint was, when was the superphosphate bin built? All the way back to look for the engraving on the concrete. So I think at that stage we went home.
That was a dumb idea.
For me, the favourite moment of any talk, and it's happened more than once, but to be in the early hours of the morning, up high, on a clear sky with a full moon, and if there's snow, and I have to say 2016 had it all from that point of view. It's been one of the best moments. And just to be up there, we actually sat down, had food and looked out over the valley and all the mountains around us. That's surreal.
Oh, it's been pretty good. The snow was a highlight, and also a low light. It was windy and cold, but it was good to have no rain and be pretty dry.
You have a monstrous dump of snow the night before, enough to dust the hills and make everything gorgeous.
And now with the fields that are so big, you just get this massive humanity racing off across the hillsides. If you could spot it from above, or you were completely unaware of what was going on, it must look absolutely crazy. And that to me is just, that's good, that's part of it.
And I've always found one of the great challenges, which I've never managed to do, is to stay awake on the bus on the way home. It's a challenge. See how long I can stay awake on the bus. Oh, it's Christchurch.
I took a couple hours and napped in the lodge. And when I walked outside, and it was so quiet. There was still a little sunlight. The sun was just setting out to the west. And the hash house, from a distance, was all closed, tidy. There's no sign that anyone had been there before. There was just a little box van parked out front, all locked up. I was sort of eerily still. I thought I might have dreamt the whole thing. You see a lot of old friends. You make a lot of new ones. It's great. It's a celebration, really. And to have it be the 50th makes it all the more so.
Yeah, there's no shortage of farms, no shortage of stations.